All right, so we're live here, another Foaming at the Mouth Friday Live. Welcome back. Troy Peterson here with BJB.
Haylee, Detroit.
And today we're going to sort of pull together what we've been working on, mainly actually Haley's been working on, but what we're going to be demonstrating today is rotocasting, and the parts, if you want to take a look at them, they're on our Instagram. It's basically these little head forms or sculpting forms. You want to explain a little bit about that and what we've done?
I can. All right. So I was given a original life cast by Jordu Schell, and it was in pretty bad disrepair. And he said that if I could fix it up and do some body work on it, that I could make a new form. And as long as he got one, he was cool with that. So I spent about 30 hours fixing this up. There was like a huge hole in it. She had seen better days. But I got it all prepped up and spent the last couple weeks making a mold for her. And so now we've started casting them, and they're coming out pretty good. We did our first pull this morning and kind of did a test pull. With rotocasting, it's always best to do, you never get it right on your first try, because it's always trying to figure out how much material, how fast to do it, where it needs to be situated in the rotocaster. But being that this was our first one, it actually came out really well. So this is our second one, and we're about to do our third shot of material in it. So that will be coming up next.
So I'll set up what we've got going on so far. So as she explained, we've got one of the sort of original sculpt form that's been body worked, and then the far left one is actually one that we rotocast yesterday to make sure that the things were dialed up right and everything. So what we've got right now, the mold is in the rotocaster currently, and we've actually done 2 shots of our TC890. It's a rigid, kind of an ABS-like material. It's a really nice all-around good working material. A lot of people like it, and a lot of people actually like to rotocast with it as well. We have some customers that also, they'll do rotocast parts as well as also do what's called slush casting. And sometimes they'll back it up with foam. Sometimes it's just a standalone part. And so what we're doing is the rotocast process, where we're not really going to need to fill the inside with anything, but you could potentially fill it with foam or whatever, but we're going to leave these hollow. So we've got 2 shots of material. So what we've done is when you have this set up here, let me stop it at a certain point here. All right, so the very first shot of material was about 800 grams of the 890. We put a little bit of a black tint into it. It's naturally a white material, so it goes gray. And as this comes around, you'll see, all right, open this up. You'll see right here is a plug. This is a bottom flat panel that we can obviously take off. But we've got 2 shots of the 890 in here, both at 800 grams each. So we put the first mix in there, and we let it rotate for about 15 minutes. Then it'll gel up to a certain point where it's safe for us to stop. It won't slump while it's still in the mold. And then we'll go ahead and mix up another batch of 800 grams and pour it in there. Now you might be asking, why do you stop? Why don't you just put 1,600? Or why don't you just put 3,000? Problem is when you put that much material that has about a 5-minute working time, if you put that much material in at once, it exotherms too quickly, and you might end up with a big lump of material that didn't evenly coat. So if you kind of take the wall thickness increase in steps, then you'll have a little bit more of a controlled wall thickness, and you can kind of build your way up into it. We want to be a little conservative at first. So we're actually going to do about 4 shots at 800 grams, and we're going to very systematically build our wall thickness carefully, so that in the past I've done a lot of rotocasting where I thought I might put a little bit larger amount in there, and it may look pretty good in some areas, and some areas may be very thin, and then there might be a giant ball of cured material where it just didn't get distributed. So we're just taking this carefully, and we could always adjust from there, speed it up if we see fit. So we're going to be opening up this plug on here, and this is really just a rubber plug. I might need to get some, oh, there we go, I got it. There we go, and it bounced away. So actually what you'll see here is there is a little bit of a flat cured film, and I just have to bust through this. Sometimes if you catch it early enough, it's soft enough to where you can just put your finger through it. We did this one a little while ago, so it's actually firmed up a little bit. But either way, I can get an X-Acto knife and pop a hole in there, and then I'll just continually pour more and more material in there. So let me grab a X-Acto knife here real quick. So like I said, ideally we would do this while it's a little bit flexible.
While Troy is working on taking that plug out, I was going to show you guys where we started off. I started with the form. Obviously, this is our first layer of silicone. We did the TC5024 with it, which is a tin silicone, nice and soft and easily taken off of the form, which is why I chose that one. And then this is me doing the first layer with the splitter board of the BR75D for the mold half, the jacket. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah, it's amazing when you go to a 5-minute material, and we let this actually kind of rotate over lunch. It gets firmed up pretty good. So
that shows you how strong the material is, though, Troy.
Exactly. Exactly. So we're going to run with that. So now what we're going to do is we've got some pre-mixed materials in there. Now this machine that we're using today, this is actually BJB's CPE 630. This is a fairly good sized rotocaster that we actually make in-house. And we've actually got a smaller one, which is the 615, CPE 615. Okay. All right, so.
Just need to remix this. The pigment settles pretty quickly in this material.
So what we have is it's a 1-to-1 by weight mix ratio of the 890. We put a little bit of black pigment into this system to give us a gray finished cured color because 890 naturally has some white to it. All right. Excellent. We're also we're skipping the degassing step on this particular material because we actually did a lot of that stuff on the first layers, and we're just backing it up. So our lives are kind of made easier by the fact that this is just backing up 2 other layers that we put in earlier. So I'm just carefully pouring this in. Okay. All right, so now the plug's in. We close these doors. These doors are really great safety feature. They have kind of like what you would call a dead man switch down here where the machine won't operate until you have that set. So I'm basically going to be setting this up. We're turning roughly in the 4 to 6 RPM range. A lot of people think that rotocasting is done centrifugally, where you're trying to fling the material out into the mold. But really, it's kind of a balance of what the viscosity of the material is, and what you're doing is you're trying to keep the material climbing up the walls of the mold, as opposed to, like I said, centrifugally trying to fling it around. If you go a little bit too slow, then you end up with pools of material that might exotherm a little bit too much and solidify before it's really coated all of the walls evenly. If you spin it too fast, sometimes it does get stuck into an area. Like in this case, you could easily get material stuck into the head and locked up, and if it's spinning so fast, it never has time to get out of that area. So it's kind of a balance. Doing it after a while, you learn some sort of basic speeds and rotation ratios of the inner to outer axis that you kind of like and what works good, but it's always still a learning process, and a lot of times it's hard to get it on the first time. You got to fine tune it. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to let this spin for 15 minutes. We've got the residue in the bucket, which is good to keep handy because we can kind of watch it, roll it around, see how it's still moving, and once it sort of gels up and doesn't want to slump or move on us, that's usually when it's safe to come back and put the next layer in so we can speed things along. But like I said, even if it waits a little bit longer, like we waited about an hour since the last one, it's still going to bond tenaciously. It's just if you don't have the luxury of time, it's good to get in sooner rather than later. Now you can see the mold is fixtured in here. We've got it fairly centered, sort of the center of mass of it. You could potentially put multiple mold cavities in this rotocast and spin them all at once. There's a lot of people who do that for parts like mannequins and things like that. That's a very commonly done thing. Luckily, we just have to deal with the one. But it sometimes takes a little bit of tuning to get all that working right. So, and then what we're going to do is then we're going to come back and put another 800 grams. So that will give us 4 shots at 800 grams. It's about 2,400 grams total. And basically, that should give us a nice wall thickness that will be sturdy to support itself. And we want these to be hollow. So that was the focus of that. So what else we got here?
I brought over some examples of some things that could be rotocasted, have been rotocasted, just to give everybody an idea of other things that you can do with it.
Yeah. So yeah, and you may have seen in some of our other posts, we've got the, this heart mold is kind of a unique shape because, number one, this mold you can see through, so you can see how the material is flowing. Not always the case in many molds, but this one is kind of nice for demonstrating purposes. And a lot of people are always asking about, like, you know, what are your rotocasting materials? And I'll be honest, I've been able to rotocast pretty much everything we've had. I've even rotocast foam before. Now, that's not necessarily to say that it's super practical. I've rotocast silicones. Silicones are going to be a little slower, and then you have to rotate them very slow because usually the viscosity is higher. But this right here is a flexible urethane. This is I believe a 40 or a 60 Shore urethane. So even if you had to do a prototype or a few one-offs or you know, a series of parts, you know, material like this, you can rotocast like our F series, our FP series, or even our F1 series. And yeah, we make some really cool parts out of that. We've had a lot of people over the years needing to, you know, prototype shampoo bottles, like new shapes and whatnot. And so you could even take, you know, something like this, make a mold of it, or this could even be a 3D printed part, make a quick mold, and then you could end up doing something like this. So this was rotocast. This part's been around for a long time. Note, it's got a yellow tint to it. This was not done with a water clear material. This was done with another type of kind of a translucent casting material. And I'm sure over the years of being exposed to some ambient UV light or fluorescence, it can yellow. So that's another thing to sort of keep track of. When you have some casting materials that look pretty clear when they first start off, they may be good enough for doing what you need to do initially, but over the long term, if you need that to maintain clarity, then we would look at a specific type of material to maintain that and not have this type of an issue down the line.
Now, Troy, while we're waiting for this to kind of set up a little, I have some questions about like rotational speed and whatnot. Is there a preferred speed for a type of material? Do the 2 axes go at the same speed? How do you figure all that out when it comes to?
Yeah, that's a good question, because a lot of people would look at this and think that this is rotating way too slow for what it should be doing. And the truth of the matter is, I have found that it's best to go as slow as you can kind of get away with, because you'll have less turbulation of the material, the casting material that's in there. Depending on how much detail there is and whatnot, you may not want to be sloshing the material around too much, or you'll end up with voids. So I found somewhere in the 4 to 6 RPM is a good sweet spot. And you don't necessarily want a 1-to-1 ratio, so you don't want to match the inner and outer axis ratio, RPMs, excuse me, at, like, say, both of them at 6 RPM. You want actually one to be off a little bit. Now, which one you choose to turn slower versus faster, you want to think of it as the material is trying to corkscrew its way through the mold, sort of from one side to the next. Now, if you have a nice symmetrical ball, then that ratio is sort of like thrown off. But a lot of parts, like this head, you're going to try to get the material to try to circulate this way to that end, and then kind of make its way back, and then do that time and time and time again. So what you'll typically find is then you'll want the axis that's going down the center this way, you want that one actually spinning faster than this one to that one spinning and sort of toppling over itself. So that's typically what I do to set up the ratios of the inner to the outer. So, all right. So at this point, I'm checking the residue in the mixing container, and it's definitely to the point of nearly gelled, but it's still. If I turn it and use gravity to my assistance and watch it, it's still slumping. So I would probably not stop the machine from rotating just yet. This is still a little bit too early, but we're almost there. We're almost there. And you've also got to imagine that these materials, they react faster in a concentrated mass. So when you spread it out into this thin film, it slows everything down. So if you're looking at a material with a 5-minute pot life, it's going to probably remain liquid in sort of in a flowable state for a good 5 to 10 minutes. It's going to be longer because it's not in that concentrated, cup of 100 grams that we sort of set the standard for all of our castable systems. When you see 5-minute work time, you'll see a little asterisk that says it was done in a 100-gram sample. We have some systems like laminating epoxies where we might do it in a 1-pound concentrated mass, but that's unique because usually you're mixing larger quantities of that material and you're keeping it in the bucket as you're doing your wet layup. So if you go onto our YouTube channel, you will see a whole list of videos that we've obviously done over the years, and if you go all the way down to the very bottom, you'll see a section here with center point equipment. Now center point is just our name for the processing equipment that we use. And there are a couple of videos here that show the rotocasting machines. There's one for the CPE 630, which I'll bring up now. And this goes through how the machine works. There's a little bit of processing information in there, but for the most part, it's just showing how the actual machine will process the materials, the benefits of this machine maybe over another type of setup equipment. But you can kind of go in there and view that. And then there's one for our smaller CPE 615 that you can check out as well. The difference between the two is the size of the mold that they will actually hold and produce. Now this large 630 can hold a fairly large and heavy mold. I mean, you could easily fit something in there mold-wise about 2.5 to 3 feet, and you also have geared motors that will hold the weight very well. So be sure to check that out. All right, so how's our stuff looking in the can?
It's definitely not moving when you rotate it, but it's still
pretty
sticky when you cut it.
So it's pretty, well, sticky's okay, but as long as it doesn't slump. So that looks like we're at a good point. We can go ahead and mix up the next batch. So yeah, that was actually good timing. It looks like the last pour of material is actually gelled up pretty good.
Nice.
So I'm just going to get in here. I'm just taking an X-Acto blade and just carefully making an opening to where I can pour the next round of material in. I prefer not to have any of these shards of sticky material end up back on the part. All right, so this is our number 4 pour at 800 grams. Okay, plugs in. I'm going to check these clamps. One of these clamps seemed a little bit loose. Yep, got it. Okay, got to make sure that mold is securely in there. All right, there we go. That's the 4th shot of 800 grams of the TC890 material in there. And so hopefully within about an hour to 2 hours, somewhere in there, it depends on the ambient room temperature and whatnot, but we'll be able to demold this. We'll go ahead and post some pictures up on our Instagram, Facebook, let you guys take a look at our results. Be a little bit long to wait around on this particular stream, so just check back in and we'll let you know how it goes. So other than that, it's Troy signing out. BJB.
Thanks for joining us again on Foaming at the Mouth Friday. We'll see you next time.
All right.